Okay. I am just going to do a quick sound and camera check. If you can put in the chat for me, if you are able to see the chat, that you can hear me and you can see me, and we're in good shape. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to start us off. Okay, and I'm just going to wait a few more minutes as other people are trickling in and joining us, and we'll start right on the hour. Okay. It's so great to see all of you here. One more minute as folks begin to come in. So great question. Everyone is automatically muted. Unfortunately, this is a little bit of a different format than a regular Zoom room. It's a Zoom webinar. So the best way for us to communicate is going to be through the chats. If at the very, very end, we have some people who want to talk to each other, we can definitely turn volumes on. Otherwise, everyone is going to be on mute, and I can't see any of you. So it's a little bit of a funny sort of medium, but I hope that we can still have a lot of interaction. Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I wanna start by welcoming all of you for being here today. I know that we are in a time when you have so many different resources available to you, and I really appreciate the fact that you chose to be with me here, and I really hope that you find the information that we'll be sharing of value. So I just want to say a couple quick administrative things before I get started. So most of you are seeing the chat option. As we go through the presentation, I'm going to be asking you questions that I want you to kind of type in the chat your answers to. You can make the choice to whether make your answers open to all the attendees or just me. That's really your choice how you want to do it. But as we go through, if you have questions that come up that have to do with the talk and are sort of more questions that pertain to your case, please put those in the Q&A section. You should all be able to see the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and then that will all save, and then at the very end of the presentation I'll be able to go in and walk through those. You are, of course, welcome to put other things in the chat, but just know that I will be asking you questions as we go through. Okay, so I want to begin with a little recap of where we are and how we got here. You can make that acronym into whatever it is that you like it to be. It's work from home. But I know that for a lot of us, this situation that we're in has been very, very difficult. And if you are a parent and you have children who are school-aged, then the difficulty is even more. And if you have a child who has a particular learning challenge or learning disability, I think that it's very natural and very normal to feel like everything is sort of out of your control, and feeling frustrated and uncomfortable. All of that is very normal. So I think the first thing that we have to do, the really, really first important step, is to just normalize that discomfort. So I want to just take a second to say that, yes, the situation that we're in, even though there's a lot of silver linings that we'll be talking about, is generally very uncomfortable, and it kind of sucks. And you're all right to feel sort of as untethered as you might. So take a second to just acknowledge that and to give yourself a pat on the back for making it as far as you have, because this has been going on for some time. And then the second thing that I think is really important that we do is to just take a deep breath. We're going to be talking about a strategy later called segmenting. It's something that I do, that I teach all of my students every time I start a session. I have them do a short meditation, a 1-minute meditation for when they first start. And that's, we're entering into a little learning period together here right now. So I'm going to ask all of you to do a 1-minute meditation with me. We'll all do it together. I know that many of you are, multitasking and doing a bunch of different things and are not going to be able to sort of sit and breathe with us, but that's okay, because just tuning into a minute of silence is going to have a positive effect on your nervous system. So don't worry about that. But for the rest of you who are in a place where you're comfortable and you can sit, if you can sit cross-legged, that's even better. If you can close your eyes, that's really great. I'm going to use one of my favorite apps. It's called the Insight Timer. I will share it with you later. And we're just gonna do 1 minute of whatever you want to call it. You don't have to call it meditation. You can call it breathing. You can call it focusing your mind, relaxing. But just for 1 minute, let's do this together. Let me just write this in case people are coming in late. Okay, so feel free to share in the chat how that felt, if you like. I'm going to quickly go over what our goals are for our talk today, and we'll come back to meditating as we move forward. So what I'm really hoping that I'll be able to do is to simplify basically and streamline the process of schooling from home that you're all in the midst of right now. I think that many of you are already doing a really beautiful and great job, and it's important that we're able to recognize that and pick out some really simple things that will hopefully help us make big changes. I'm hoping that this talk will help you to embrace this new normal that we are in. For those of us who are in California, we already know that the rest of the school year is basically going to happen from home. This is our new normal, no matter what happens in terms of the stay-at-home order, and we need to just embrace that. And then I'm hoping that you can begin, as a result of our time together here today, to maybe trust yourself and all the things that you're already doing and all the expertise that you already have, because you know a lot more than you do. And then if I'm at all able to get you excited about the sort of possibility of what this time can really mean in terms of advocating for children with different kinds of learning needs, then I've really done a good job. But if you can right now, then just share in the chat with me if you're comfortable, and like I said, you can do it with me only or with other people, how many kids you have, and babies count, the age or grade level that they're in, and whether they're in a private or public school. And if you're comfortable sharing what their particular diagnosis is, that's perfectly fine. If you are a professional who's joined us, and you don't have to necessarily put this information in the chat. So I'm just going to be looking at what some of you are writing here so that I have a little bit of a sense as we move forward. Okay. Wow. 4 children. That's amazing. You're amazing. Okay, so a lot of 6th and 7th graders I'm seeing, and a lot of private school students. Okay. All right, and some public students. I'm seeing ADHD. Okay, wonderful. So we have sort of a range. I'm not seeing a lot of students who are high schoolers or college students. I think college students count. Some of you are grandparents who are here. That's wonderful. Some of you might not have a specific diagnosis, but if you're here, hopefully this will still help you kind of navigate things. Wonderful. So feel free to continue to put those in as we move forward. But before I kind of get started, I want to give you a little bit of background about me for those of you who might not know me or be familiar with my background. I work as an educational therapist. I've been in private practice for about 14 years. I'm about to age myself. I have a very boutique practice where I work with kids with different kinds of learning challenges. And my background, I came to educational therapy from a different route than many people do. My background is in neuroscience. I was very much involved with research around learning. And for those of you who do know me, you know that when I do talks and speaking for teachers, parents, etc., it's usually around brain-based education and sort of understanding the neuroscientific basis of learning and how learning breaks down. We're not going to be talking about neuroscience today. I really think that we're in a time where we can't digest anymore. Our cognitive load is already too much. But that is always the background that I bring. I'm also a big advocate for kids with different kinds of learning challenges and neurodiversity. I believe that learning disability is a social justice issue. So that is another aspect of my work, and you're welcome to go and read more about my background and research on my website if you like. But what I think is happening is actually something really quite unique. I think that most of us right now, because of the situation that we're in, have, no matter how well we're dealing with it, we have a baseline level of anxiety right now. And I think that that generally tends to be how kids with different kinds of learning challenges feel. I think that we are also in a time where all of our structures have been turned upside down, which again is how a lot of kids with learning challenges feel. So in some ways, we are now able to put ourselves in the shoes of our children in a way that we have never been able to do before. And that's something that I'm going to come back to throughout the talk, because I think it is really important that we mine the power of that. But what I am really hoping to kind of communicate to you today is a two-part plan. I've been hearing from the parents that I interact with in my practice and in the community about a lot of anxiety regarding, okay, well, what's going to happen? What do we do next year? What are we supposed to do for the summer? No one really has a feeling of what's going to come next. And what I really want to do is to get you to make a two-part plan for yourself. So depending on where you are now, today is April 15th. So between April 15th and the end of the school year for your child, so whether it's beginning of June, end of May, end of June, whenever it happens to be, we have about 8 to 10 weeks of this time that we need to get through. And I want you to just focus on that right now. And that will be the part that we're going to really talk about together today. And then the summer and what we will need to do, I'm hoping to do another webinar on that to help parents kind of better understand how we can make up for some of the things that we're losing right now. But I don't want you to sort of be in this place of, thinking about everything between now and when things become normal. All you need to think about is between now and when the school year ends. So that's going to be the first part of our plan, the part that we're going to focus on today. So if you can, in the chat, share with me now what your biggest challenge has been so far in terms of schooling from home. And you're more than welcome to share more than one challenge, but if you can really pick one out, that would be great. Okay, getting and keeping kids engaged, knowing if they're actually doing the work. By the way, if you are, you need to click on the chat so that you can share it with all panelists and attendees in order to see everybody's chat. Otherwise, you're only sending it to me. Okay, so basically getting kids to work on their own, dealing with your own frustrations, sure. Some people are saying maybe that option is not available. I'm able to see everybody's, and I will try to address them as I go along. Not feeling engaged, keeping them active, lack of physical movement. Okay, yes, I know, that's a big one. Okay. If the option is not available for you to post to all, you can also post these in the Q&A now. I'm not going to be able to see them, so please put it in the Q&A and in the chat, because the chat is what I'm looking at. Combining screens and technology, sure. Yes, not being able to see friends, so true. Okay, so what I'm hoping to sort of help you see, hopefully, is that in addition to the pandemic that we are dealing with, I feel that we're also dealing with what you might call a little bit of an ADHD pandemic. And the reason for that is that all of our regular structures in terms of time, in terms of space, in terms of the way that we see others and communicate with others, everything has been turned on its head. And in a way, we are moving through life, I think, in a similar way as to what some kids with executive function and ADHD issues are moving through life. We talk about, for example, in ADHD, about how, you know, kids don't really have the ability to project onto the future, organize and plan themselves, or even see the future, and are just very much living in the present moments. And I think that a lot of us are feeling that way right now. Our frontal lobes are very much taxed. And I think this, again, is a really important silver lining in kind of understanding and empathizing with our students. So I want to begin by introducing you to one of my students. This is Carrie. She had recorded a little video for you, but I didn't want to risk the technical glitches from that. So this is a picture of her. This is at our last session, which was last week. Carrie and I have been working together for about 1.5 years. She has ADHD, and she also has a generalized anxiety disorder. Obviously, she's allowed me to share that with all of you. And she and I began working together in the way that I work with many of my students. So we started off twice weekly, and then once weekly, and now I see her once every other week. And we were reflecting the last time that I saw her on, you know, this whole switch and how things have been going. And she said, you know, it really hasn't been that hard for me, because of a lot of the strategies that we've been working on are actually sort of pandemic survival strategies. And I asked her, you know, just to sort of tell me what she feels has been helpful. And she said, well, these meetings that we have, even though they're once every 2 weeks, where we get to reflect on the past little while and then look ahead and plan and organize what's coming up, that's been really helpful. All the work that we've been doing around having your own clear space has been really helpful. She is privileged in that her mom has a business, and her mom has there's a building where she can actually go and work outside of her home environment, which is something that I very much encouraged her to do. And then she talked about the importance of learning how to advocate for herself with her teachers, which is something that we've been working on. So, you know, as I then began to think about what she was mentioning, I began to see that she's really talking about the 3 pillars of executive function. So for those of you who are not familiar with executive function, ADHD is an executive function disorder. And I'm not going to get into sort of the science of it, but it is essentially where the frontal lobes are not able to work in the same ways. And our executive functions are our ability to really organize ourselves and figure ourselves out in time and space. And this is something that you know, people with ADHD really struggle with. And we generally speaking, we have structures that help all of us with this. So the fact that you can get up in the morning, get dressed, get in a car, drive someplace else, now you're in a new space, that is a structure that helps you organize your space. We don't have that right now. In terms of time, I'm sure that many of you, I felt like March had 100 days in it. I mean, our entire concept of time has been turned upside down. And then communication. So for example, right now I'm communicating with you virtually. I can see that some of you are having some difficulties that unfortunately I'm not able to get to right now. So our virtual communication is just, it's not the same as what it used to be. And so the structures that we normally have in place to help with the executive functions are not there anymore. But what that means is this can also be an opportunity for us to really try practicing and building those structures for our kids, especially our kids with these types of challenges. So if you can share in the chat with me now, in terms of space, tell me where your child is working right now. And of course, you're welcome to also share with me where you are working right now. Everything that I'm talking about here in terms of children also applies to parents. So this is not something that's just for kids. But where are your kids working right now? Okay, so some of you have a dedicated space. Okay, great. So a lot of you have already put your children in a separate, dedicated space. Some of you, they're in the living room or the kitchen table. And then, of course, if you have more than one child, then there's a question of having more than one space. Okay. All right. So I want to give you some basic principles in terms of space. And I recognize that you have to make all of this fit in terms of your own household and what's possible for you. But generally speaking, it's really important that there is a space that is separate from that is separate and is unique for academic time. And the reason for that is that we associate space with the function. So for example, if I'm in my bedroom, my brain is going to have different brain waves than if I'm in my kitchen, because in the bedroom, I know that it's time to relax. It's a private space. It's my space. But if I'm in the kitchen, it's interactive. I'm with other people. So we have to have a space that is dedicated to just academics. And it doesn't have to be a separate room. It can just be a little desk somewhere, but it does need to be a designated space. Obviously, if the space is quiet, that is really important. If quiet is not possible, noise canceling headphones can be really helpful. It's really important that the space is uncluttered. I know that some parents have areas for their kids to work, but there's so many different things around in terms of materials and school things. If it's not possible for you to clean all that up, just make sure that at least the desk surface is uncluttered. Try to make sure that the space is well lit. The possibility of being able to sit up in an upright spine is really important, and to the extent that it's possible, make sure that there are no distractions. Now, I know that for a lot of us right now, the space that we have that we associate with school or with work is our computer space, the laptop that we're staring into. And that's actually okay. What's important, of course, is that you, for the academic times, you're able to cut out or put on silent everything else that is non-academic that could be distracting. And I recognize that that can be really hard, especially if your kids are older, but that is something that you really need to work to do. And if it is possible to you and have 2 different laptops for them, that's really important as well. So I know that this is, for some families who are in smaller spaces, this could be easier said than done. And if you have specific questions about your space or specific concerns, feel free to put those in the Q&A and I will get to them. But that really is the first thing. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it makes a huge, huge difference. Okay, so once we figure out the space, we need to move on to time. How are you helping your children and yourself? What tools are you using? What are you doing to help keep track of time? in this very timeless time that we're in. Daily schedules on a whiteboard. Timers, regular mealtime, great. Verbal reminders can work. The ADHD green square clock, wonderful. Okay, a daily schedule. Okay, so many of you are already in a pretty good place. There's 4 components that I suggest when it comes to keeping track of time: calendars, timers, meditation apps, and accountability. Now, accountability doesn't maybe feel like it's something that fits in with time, but that is where I fit it, because especially now more than ever, you need to be able to make sure that you're giving tasks that need to be done within a certain period of time, and then holding your children accountable for that. So when all of this started, I sort of shared this daily COVID-19 schedule on my LinkedIn, and it, as an attempt to help parents. This was before everything shut down for good, and we thought this was going to be a temporary problem, and encourage people to sort of tailor this to their own needs, and there was a lot of positive feedback about it. There's some general things about this that are helpful. So as you can see, academic time is sandwiched in between non-academic time, so that's really important. And I hope that you're also seeing that there is not as much academic time as a lot of people think there needs to be. A lot of parents feel that they're supposed to recreate the school day, and that is not what you're supposed to do. If you have an elementary child and they're doing about an hour of academic time a day, that's plenty, because there's a lot of other things happening throughout the course of the day that are not academic. If you have a middle schooler, then you're sort of in that 2-hour period, and then 2 to 3 hour, depending on where they are in middle school. And then for high schoolers, obviously it's going to be a little bit more. But it's important to recognize, sort of in terms of time, it doesn't have to be as much as many parents fear it needs to be. So then somebody put this in the comments for me on LinkedIn and said, well, this is what our actual daily schedule looks like. And that's totally fine. It is really important to actually start with seeing how it is that you're spending your time. So when people decide to go on a diet, the first thing that we have them do is to keep a food journal, because we want to know how they're actually spending their time. I began to notice, for example, like throughout the course of the week I'm working, but on the weekends, I just was basically not going out of the house and not really doing much. And then that begins to kind of get you down when you're just at home all the time and doing nothing. And so I began to realize that I need to make some shifts there. So just bringing your attention to how you are spending your day is really, really important. For some people, something this rigid can feel like too much. And so in cases like that, I really recommend that instead of thinking of it in terms of time, you think of it in terms of tasks. And I have a whole system of how you would kind of figure out your day in terms of the tasks that you have. And something that I call the mine, yours, ours calendar. Now, for the purposes of timing here with all of you today, I knew that I wouldn't have enough time to go through all that. So in the follow-up email from this, you will get a recording that is essentially going to walk you through different ways that you can do your daily schedule, so that you are not dealing with your kids like this. And the yours, mine, ours calendar is something that I recommend parents do anyway all the time, but I think that right now it's become absolutely imperative, because it's really important that you are able to work your child's schedule with your work schedule from home. Okay. So let me just say a few words about segmenting. So I mentioned at the very, very beginning that whenever I have a student begin a session or begin to work on something, I teach them to do a 1-minute meditation. And then during our session, depending on how long it is or the different types of things that we're doing, I also use this as a technique to help them make transitions. So this is something that is not just for sort of relaxing and lowering anxiety, it's also for helping with focus and timing itself. I should note that for many kids, it can feel very uncomfortable in the beginning. For many adults, it can feel very uncomfortable in the beginning to just sit with yourself. There's a really great free YouTube sort of 21-day challenge that teaches kids about meditation in these 5-minute videos, and I will also share that with you. But you don't need to necessarily teach them to meditate. That's not the point. The point is to just have a little segment that separates the different parts of the day and gets them ready for the academic segment, especially that they are about to enter. And it doesn't need to be silent if that's something that doesn't work for your kids. These apps have these options where, you know, they sort of show you a screen and they just follow 5 breaths in and out, and that also works just as well. So I have a question here, basic assumption that kids follow the schedule, managing tech screen. Okay, so let's, Lisa, if you don't mind, let's hold on to that and put it in the Q&A so that I can address it at the very, very end. And I recognize that it's not just about setting up systems, it's about getting your kids to use the systems. That's oftentimes the hardest part, but you still do have to begin by setting up the systems. And of course, at this point, a lot of schools are giving a little bit of scheduling, and in the video that I will share, I'll talk about also how to take the school schedule and put it on top of your home schedule. Okay, so the third part is communication. So I really feel that this is an incredible time in terms of what we can learn about the needs of our children, especially our children with different kinds of learning challenges, and what we can then advocate later on, not right now, but later on with schools and teachers in terms of what they need. So I really do think that this crazy work from home thing that has essentially allowed kids to do self-paced learning is something really quite incredible. And for those of us who are educators and sort of in advocacy, we are just learning so much from this time. And I hope that I can encourage you to do the same thing. But I also know that it can be very difficult, especially because, you know, for those who are especially in public schools, there has not been a lot of attention and direction given in terms of, you know, modifications and accommodations, etc. So I'm just curious to see what your experience has been so far in terms of advocating for your child or communicating with teachers about the issues that you're having in terms of schooling from home. What are some things that have come up? And, you know, these could be positive things and these could be negative things. I have a number of clients who feel like so many things have been easier for their students because they don't have the added pressures of, oh, I left something at home, or I lost something on the way, or I don't know where my backpack is. So having everything on their Google Classroom or wherever it is has been really helpful. Other people feel that that's really not the case at all, and the kids are not able to start things off, and they're not getting the regular feedback from the teachers that they really need. So it's been difficult for them. Okay, so I'm hearing some kids are doing really well because their schools are doing a good job. That's great. Yeah, so if your child doesn't necessarily qualify for something, that is always frustrating, because obviously the entire system is set up so that you only get help if your child is very severely impacted. Oh, okay. So reaching out to the school, asking teachers to hold Zoom calls. Everything feels like it's changing, absolutely. And overwhelming. Right, so, I mean, I will just say this to you, that the first time, I have a student who is on the spectrum, and our sessions, just our regular normal sessions, can be very, very tough. And the first time that he and I had a virtual session, I was like, okay, this is not going to work. I'm going to go out of business. There's no way to do this work virtually. And it was really, really frightening. Virtual learning for kids with different kinds of learning challenges can be very, very difficult. So as we'll talk about later, I do think that it's really important that we shift our expectations. And hopefully I can help you rest assured that that's okay, and it's not going to have long-term effects for your kids, but we do need to shift our expectations. And of course, yeah, a lot of uncertainty. And then some people, their kids are really loving homeschooling. So a pretty big range. I do want to say that I do think, generally speaking, when you are the parent of a child with a learning difference, there tends to be challenges between home and school. And there tends to be tension with schools, because a lot of schools don't necessarily know what differentiation is, or what inclusion is, or how to meet the needs of children. But I think that right now it can feel especially tense because parents are suddenly expected to get a master's degree and get a specialty certificate in educational therapy and do all the work that generally schools are expected to do. But I do want to say a word about teachers that I think is really important. So this is a picture of me and my mom. She is a high school chemistry teacher in downtown LA, in a region where, generally speaking, out of the class of 40 students that she has, maybe 5 or 6 people show up to her Zoom lessons. And this is the night that, they made the announcement that this was going to be our new normal, and she had to learn essentially overnight. She'd never used Zoom before, and this is me teaching her how to do that. She had to learn how to figure all this out. And so teachers are responding to this situation in very, very different ways. Some teachers are very tech savvy, are loving it, and they're having a great time with it, and then other teachers are really struggling. And obviously, depending on the school that you're at, some schools are doing a phenomenal job and are teaching their classes live on Zoom throughout the day. Others are just sort of sending a long list of these are the things that your kid needs to do. So there's a lot of variety, but I do think that for the most part, teachers have done an incredible job and are trying really, really hard to be partners with you and with us in this big transition. So it is really important, if you don't already have a good relationship or an ongoing relationship with the teachers at your school, that you use this as an opportunity to ask for what you need. You need to be able to say to them, my son or daughter is struggling with this, cannot do this because of, and then if you have a diagnosis, then you name that. And that really helps it helps to put the child on the teacher's radar, because most teachers right now are so busy just trying to do what it is that is expected of them now online and learn all these other things, that they're not necessarily able to give that kind of individual attention. But you are going to be able to do that for your kid, hopefully. I am also going to be sending a little video snippet where I go through this step by step, because there is an art in the way that you need to email teachers in order to get what you want from them. And it doesn't always start with, how can you not understand this? I'm losing my mind here. But it can be a time to actually really get more individualized attention for your child. So I encourage you to do that. And in the video that I will share later, I'll talk more about that. Okay, so that was a lot of information that I sort of threw at you. I know that it's basic things, but it really is these small things that make a huge amount of difference. So you're all now certified executive function coaches. What I'm really trying to communicate to you is that if you get the space, time, and regular communication piece going, it is going to make a really, really big difference in terms of how you are navigating the next 8 weeks. Keep in mind, though, that this is not the time for perfectionism. You are not trying to kind of finish your 8-week project and get an A plus. You are just trying to essentially survive this time as best as you can. Your version of what's happening with your child at school is not going to be what school does. No one expects that to be the case. So take it easy on yourself, take it easy on your children, and take it easy basically on the schools too, if you can. So we're gonna switch now and give you an opportunity to ask more specific questions, but I do want to also, just because I know that this is something that's on the minds of a lot of people, so let's say that we figure out how to get through the next 8 to 10 weeks, then what happens? What about all the things that my child has missed? I do want to say that all of this happened basically in March, and we were pretty late into the school year. So it's not that the whole year is shot. There's a few months of instruction that are just not going to be the same. It's not going to have these terrible, horrible long-term effects that some people fear it might. At the same time, I do think that we need to begin right now even to think about our summers a little bit differently. So I want to use this opportunity, especially for those of you who are concerned about what's going to happen next, to use the chat right now to just put in whatever your concerns are. Like, think of this as this bowl where we're going to gather all this up, and then those of us who are in the field are going to think this through and come back and hopefully give you a really, really good option for what we can do during the summer to help shift some of the things that that we've been experiencing. It might be that most of us have to spend the summer in therapy because this really does have a mental health component to it, and for some, there's no way that we're not going to have to deal with a mental health crisis at some level as adults and with our children after this. So that is definitely going to have to be a component of it. But I really feel that the summer needs to be spent doing some kind of processing skills building intensive. A lot of people are concerned about the actual contents that their child is missing. I think everyone coming back next year is going to know that certain content was missed. That's not what concerns me as much. We just need to make sure that we have a sense of where our kids are in terms of the processing, and to use the summer to build that up. And so that's sort of what I have in the back of my mind. And of course, I'm going to be very curious to see what many of you think is going to be needed for the summer. Okay, yes, and some of us are concerned that the schools are not going to open in August or September. That is a possibility. I do think that just in terms of being able to handle ourselves, we should begin with the assumption right now that we need to close out the school year. The summer is going to be the summer, and then the new school year will start. If that doesn't happen, we'll deal with it. But for now, I think that if we begin to think that far ahead and worry, it's just going to essentially paralyze us. So, continue to put what you need to in the chat. But my big kind of takeaways, reminders for all of you is to remember to lower your expectations. So my student who, for example, the student that I mentioned in the virtual learning, it was just not happening. Now we're in a little bit of a better place. We figured out the technology. He's not necessarily turning off his screen in the middle of our session. But are we doing what we were able to do before? No, of course not. We're able to do somewhere between 50 to 70%, but that's a really big win. That is a good thing. For those of you who are able to get it, I really recommend that you do get yourself some support at this time. If you are not familiar with educational therapy, aetonline.org is where you can go to basically get some support to help you through this time. I know that people have been incredible in terms of sharing resources and putting things out for free, etc. But sometimes that could feel even more overwhelming. And having somebody that can sort of sift through all that and curate it and give you what you need for your specific child, I think can be really, really important. And then, of course, remember to practice beginner's mind. We are now learning in a way that actually, again, brings us closer to our kids who are learning all day long when they're in school. And these are the things that we expect them to do. And it's really time right now for a lot of us to try and begin to, walk the talk and actually practice the beginner mind principles that we ask of them. I don't know that every single day, can feel like fun, but I hope that every single day you remember to keep your sense of humor about the situation that we're in. I think that humor is one of the things that's really, really going to help us get through this. And so before we switch to the Q&A part, I was also hoping that I could ask all of you to share one thing in the chat. It doesn't have to be school related. Maybe it is school related, but something in the chat about a funny or touching experience that you've had with your child in quarantine that, made you laugh or gave you a feeling of, we're going to get through this. Just something that really made you think. And as you're doing that, I'm just going to quickly share my my website information. And like I said, you will all get a copy of this talk and the recording and the other 2 recordings that I talked about at the very, very end. But I'm now going to switch us to the Q&A. Okay, so we have our participant number is very high, so it's going to be difficult for me to put people's voices on. I think this will be more. It will work better if I just go through these. If you need to log off, that's perfectly fine. This will be recorded and you can come back to it later. If you had a specific question that you want a specific answer to, feel free under your question to put your email and I will email you back with an answer. But I'm just going to go through here and sort of read out loud what some of the people have asked. So how much can we really expect our teachers to be doing remotely? Is it unrealistic? Yes, I don't think that we can have the same expectations of our teachers or of our education professionals as we do in regular circumstances. But I think that one shift in your perspective that can be really helpful is to see this not as a time where we have to do everything the way that it's supposed to be or the way that we were supposed to do it before, but to actually see this as a time where we're doing something different. There is no place better than home to figure out executive function. So when I work with a family around executive function, it's always in the home. It's always about figuring out what's happening with the whole entire family, because that is going to impact the child and the child is going to impact the whole family. So this, I think, is a time for you to learn more about your child's executive function needs and other needs, but it's also a time for teachers, I think, to begin to really understand what kids with different learning challenges need. So one of the things that I'm always advocating for when I'm at schools is, okay, well, this thing that is your expectation or this thing that is the standard is not going to work for this particular student. So can you tell me what the 2 or 3 really, really important things are, and that is what we will get done. And generally speaking, there can be, if your child doesn't have an IEP, there can be pushback from schools on a request like that. Right now, most likely the teachers are going to say yes to that. And so if you do that, and if it works, later on, you will be able to use these as examples to say, well, this is what worked for my kid. Can we do that now? So I do think that this can be a time where we mine this for really, really, really important information and things that we can use to advocate later. Okay, so live Zoom classes that cover all the contents that day versus letting kids work on a schedule that works for them. Okay, so again, there's a lot of variety. Some teachers are doing live Zoom lessons every single day. Obviously, it's much, much harder for students to stay attentive when they're doing something virtually than if they were in class. That then on the other hand, for some kids, that works a lot better. Having a live Zoom helps them a lot more than if they just had to go through. I would say that your general rule of thumb should be do what works for your kid. If your kid is wasting their time sitting in a live Zoom and they're not comprehending or attending or learning anything, you can write an email to the teacher and say, this isn't going to work for my child because of this reason. Can you tell me what the important takeaways are? And he will learn that on his own time. So if that's what works better for you, do that. On the other hand, if there is this independent study that's been given and your kid is just like, I have no idea what to do, and you don't necessarily know how to help them, you need to then reach out to the teacher and ask for a live Zoom. So a lot of teachers are having office hours. If they're not having office hours, you can still request something live. You can, if there's a learning specialist or resource teacher, someone like that at the school, you can maybe try to contact them and ask for live help. So it really depends on the student and what their particular needs are. I think that depending on the kid, it can be really helpful to have live Zooms, or it can just really not work at all. Okay. Okay, so let me just see. There's a basic assumption that kids can follow the schedule, managing tech screen access while the parent is working. Yeah, so I do, and I know that a lot of people are also just generally concerned about screen time, because now suddenly kids are in front of a screen for a very, very long period of time. I want to remind you that this is a temporary thing. So even though generally speaking, it's not a good thing, it's not going to have this detrimental effect. It's just basically a couple months. It's not great, but it's going to be okay. It's not that big of a deal. You don't need to worry about it. In terms of having them be on their screen while the parent is working and not necessarily attending to what they need to be attending to. I talk more about that in the video in terms of how to manage things so that you can be there to work with them on things when you're available, on the things that they need someone else to work with them on. But I think that you have to also practice letting go a little bit in this case. So is your child going to do things that maybe you're not going to love? Are they going to be on the screen paying attention to things that maybe you wish you could turn off, but you can't? Yes, to some extent, all of that is going to happen. Obviously, if you are able to turn everything on during academic time and then turn it back on for non-academic time, that would be the best case scenario. But that's not always going to work, and that's okay. It's okay if things aren't going based on the principles that you know to be true right now. We're all going to survive this, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. How to keep an area uncluttered. I know, and it's especially hard now that we're all at home, and home just feels cluttered in general. I think that you can make uncluttering and kind of cleaning up a fun task that everyone can do together. But if all of that feels like it's too much, like I said, I really recommend that you just create one little space that's uncluttered, take all the clutter from that and put it in another space. So you can have areas of your home that are very cluttered, but there should be a clean, uncluttered space that is specific for academics. And then how do you know that your child is actually doing the work? Organizing all the links and schoolwork. Right, and answering constant questions. So I know that that's a really, really big thing. And part of doing the sort of mine, yours, ours calendar is to help manage that a little bit, because otherwise you are just spending all day long answering their questions. In terms of making sure that they're doing their work, I recommend that at the beginning of the week or at the beginning of the day, however it is that it works for your family, you go through and you figure out what the important things are that your child needs to do that day. And you write those down. And then you need to hold them accountable for doing those things. So you need to have them come in and show you that they did all those things. I know it's an extra step. And it can be difficult, but it is really, really important in terms of that timing factor that you are holding them accountable. Emailing teachers can be an important and helpful half step in that. So maybe the whole week went by and you don't really know all the things that got missed. So, and if you don't have a way of going onto Google Classroom or wherever to check that, you can email the teacher and say, you know, what were the things that got missed this week? And if 10 things come back, pick 2 of them and just do those 2 things, and then email the teacher back and say, we did these 2 things, it took this time, we're not going to be able to do the rest. I don't think that we're in a time where teachers are going to be as strict as before. If you find that that is the case, then you know, follow the email rule in terms of how to communicate with them to get them to understand that they need to make modifications for your child. Okay. So I have a question from a learning specialist. Yeah, so you're offering a lot of individual support in office hours, but some kids are still struggling and making life tough for parents. And there's no question. I mean, there's nothing that we can do here that's going to make everything perfect. And that's sort of what I was referring to when I said we all need to bring our expectations down so that we can feel like we are succeeding. The word that you're looking for is progress. It's progress. And it's progress not compared to where kids were before, it's progress compared to the first day when all of this happened. And progress can oftentimes be 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and that's all right. That's sort of how these things work. But as long as you can generally say, okay, week by week, and you can measure that however you want. Week by week, I feel like my child is getting a little bit more comfortable with this online environment. Week by week, my stress levels and you know, the amount of yelling that I'm doing is decreasing a little bit. That is progress, and that is how you should be measuring, you know, your success right now. Okay, so unless there are things that I'm missing, I think I've gotten to those questions. And there's a question here about schoolwork refusal. Do we take a 15-minute break for the day? Okay, so yes. So refusal to do schoolwork is usually a symptom of I am feeling completely overwhelmed and I don't know what to do, and the expectations are beyond what I can do. I think that in cases like that, you really do need to begin with that acknowledgement step and then relaxation step. And then just starting with one small thing. And it doesn't have to be an academic thing. It could be one small thing that you can ask your child to do that they then do. And that will begin to shift the relationship so that you are not feeling like, you know, your child is being defiant, and they're not feeling like they're a bad kid because they're not doing what you are asking them to do. Most kids want to be able to please and want to be able to do what is being asked of them. Generally speaking, that's a sign of I can't handle it, and you need to help them break it down, and you need to ask the teachers to help them break it down. Don't feel shy about emailing the teacher and saying, my child is having a meltdown, you know, all day, every day. This isn't working. Can we break this up into smaller pieces? I know that a lot of parents feel like that's somehow a reflection of, you know, your inability to deal with your kid or something. It's not. This is a very, very unusual circumstance, and it is especially difficult for kids who have learning challenges. And that is what you always want to begin with. You want to remind them that your kid has this particular challenge, and because of that, these things are happening, and ask them to break it down. So in my work, you know, the work that I do with teachers or learning specialists or whoever I'm working with, I have regular emails or even Zooms with them where I say, okay, well, I went through, these are the things that we'll be able to do, and these other things we're not going to be able to do. Or what I do is at the end of the session, I just send an email and I say, these are the things we worked on, so that they can see that this is not a kid who's just trying to get out of work. I say, these are the things that we worked on, this is what we got done, and that's it. And that's it. And they, you know, they might email back and say, oh, what about this and this? And I'll say, well, we'll try to get to that tomorrow, and if we do, great, and if we don't, great. So one really good strategy is to just go based on time. I don't think that you can expect your child to be doing more than an hour of homework right now, and you want to break that up into pieces. When they do the work, wherever it is that things ended, you end it there, you email the teacher and you say, this is where we ended. And they just need to understand. Obviously, in normal circumstances, you would have to make the case for why you're going to do that. But as I said, right now, I feel that you can do that, and it'll be okay. Hopefully, it'll be okay. But my other suggestion, my other big suggestion, is to get support. We are here for you. Those of us who are education professionals and mental health professional, we are here for you, and we want you to reach out and get help so that we can support kids, so that we can all get through this together. So don't be shy about asking for help. And if you have specific questions about that, email me, and I will try my best to connect you to people, resources, whatever it is that I can do. Okay, so we're coming up on our time. I want to thank all of you for being here today. You will all get the follow-up email from me, and it was really great to have all of you on today, and I hope that this was at least of some value to you. Take care, everybody. Thank you.